I I come with some hesitation before this audience. The subject assigned, I'm supposed to speak about educating the culturally deprived. I'm fully aware that many of you are a good bit closer to this process than I. I suspect I find myself in the position of the Irish mother and her daughter who came out of church after hearing the priest deliver a stirring sermon on holy matrimony, and the daughter said, "Oh, mother, wasn't it wonderful what the father said about the blessed state of holy matrimony?" And the mother said, "Yes, daughter, 'twas wonderful. That it was, and I wish that I knew as little about it as he does." I would not therefore brave your scorn or your comments were it not for a belief that the professional purposes that bring you here justify the maximum effort of any person who dedicates himself to a profession. The profession with which we're concerned roots itself fundamentally in the teaching process. This is something that happens in a classroom. It happens on the basis of a relationship established between a teacher and a group of children. And this teacher is in a position from minute to minute of making decisions about what is going to be done with, to, and for those children. These decisions cannot be reversed, not by anyone. When they're made, the thing that then happens to the child proceeds to unfold. There's no way to second-guess what a teacher does. This means that there's no way for our society to guarantee the quality of education except by placing its confidence in the quality of a qualified and competent professional person. This means, in turn, that that person must somehow earn and gain and keep the status and the freedom by which he can make those decisions. He can do this only through an organized profession. It's because of the essential nature of the organization of the profession that you people are here tonight. And it's because you are prepared to put out your energies to testify to the necessity for the organization of the profession of education that I feel it an obligation on myself to do what I can to further this meeting. This accounts for my being here as it does for you. I hope that what I have to say on this difficult and contentious subject may be found worthy of your energies. Some time ago, the Educational Policies Commission turned its attention to the problems caused by the concentration in our great cities of large numbers of culturally deprived persons. Because of social and cultural deprivation, these persons are severely disadvantaged when they find themselves in a modern city. Their inability to adapt is leading to a decay which is weakening our entire society. Now, I'm going to call these persons tonight disadvantaged Americans. The term, I realize, has some disadvantages itself. It's the best I can do for now. The Educational Policies Commission has a major study underway on these people. The Commission has not yet decided what its policy recommendations are to be, although the document which is before them is now out to the Commission in what we hope is its final form. It may, for all I know, even change the title of the project. Please understand, therefore, that when I speak on this subject, I'm not speaking for the Policies Commission or for any of its members. I'm speaking for myself alone. I'm setting forth my own views as to the dimensions of this problem and what we can do about it. Although the problem arises primarily in the great cities, I hope that no one here will conclude on that account that it is not of concern to him. Particularly, I hope that those of you who are in rural and suburban schools will recognize that this problem is also of concern to you. If the cities of this nation cannot survive, the countryside cannot flourish either. And those of you who have sons, you should ponder the fact that the draft quotas set in selective service are set in terms of the whole young male population. And when a young man is found unable to fulfill that obligation, the obligation does not cease on the others. It simply passes from them to your own son. Today there can be only one answer to the question, am I my brother's keeper? I leave to you whether you think the American people have yet made a satisfactory response. Who are these disadvantaged persons? They come in four principal streams. Negroes from the rural South. Second, whites from the rural South, principally from the Appalachian uplands. Third, Puerto Ricans. Fourth, Spanish-speaking persons from the arid Southwest. There are other sources, but they're not as numerous as those I've cited. We do not have accurate figures today as to the dimensions of these streams. It's safe to say, though, that the largest and the least adaptable is the southern rural Negro. Note also that not all persons in these categories can be called disadvantaged. Some are severely deprived and unable to adapt. Others make the transition with comparative ease. The disadvantaged may properly be called those persons in each of these streams whose backgrounds prevent an adaptation which maintains a personal dignity consistent with the American promise. It is important to realize that these streams do not originate in the cities, but in pockets of backwardness in rural areas, eddies in the mainstream of modern life. Modern life has roiled these backwaters and propelled these disadvantaged persons to the cities. Because they cannot successfully adapt to urban life, they're causing a variety of problems which cannot be and should not be glossed over. I've used the word decay to describe the situation. I believe that while the term is harsh, it's also accurate. It is sometimes said that the disorders which attend the arrival of the disadvantaged are caused by racial differences. The tendency to attribute the problem to race is easily understood because racial differences are present and are easy to see and in too many cases do produce tension. The same clash occurs, however, within each racial group. It's no more possible for middle-class northern Negroes to live with disadvantaged Negroes than it is for whites to live with this group. The same problems arise and in the same context. This fact indicates that the problem is at its root one of incompatibility between the cultures which come in contact in this way. Thus, this is a cultural problem, not a racial one, and it will have to be dealt with by a change in the cultures of the disadvantaged persons. If these people are so ill-adapted for city life, it's a fair question to ask why they come there at all. You'll hear it said that they come seeking opportunities for a better life. Well, I think, okay, maybe it's true. It's true probably in some cases. But in a tragically large number of cases, they come because they are impelled by their inability to survive where they come from. In recent years, the farm economy and technology have changed, and these changes have worsened the plight of the disadvantaged. The farmer must produce as efficiently as he can. This means that he must use machinery and new farming methods, so he can no longer welcome ineffective farmers on his land. These facts, coupled with the invention of machinery for tending and harvesting the staple crops of the South, have resulted in the closing out of opportunities for sharecroppers and tenant farmers. Lacking the ability to understand modern farm technology or public arrangements for farm credit, soil control, or crop insurance, they've been losing ground increasingly in comparison with better educated farmers, and finding themselves unemployed or indeed unemployable, the disadvantaged are now being forced off the land into the cities. When they move, they carry with them the cultures under which they have lived. These cultures cannot be reconstituted in cities. There are many reasons for this. Let me give you just one example. Take the problem of what we've been calling the matriarchal family group. That's a nice way of referring to a family tradition which does not involve the presence of a father, a family in which there's no wage earner. I once used that term, and a teacher said to me, "Why do you use such big words? So why don't you say it simply? Why do you say matriarchal?" And I didn't answer, but I thought, well, it may be a big word, but it's a lot better word than the other words we use to describe that situation. The matriarchal family is a kind of family which could survive in the rural South in places endowed by nature with unusual advantages, with good soil and plenty of sun and rain. Under those circumstances, the breadwinner may not be necessary, and you did not have a family in the sense in which we in cities understand the term. Groups with these cultural patterns were able to persist on the land over a long period of time. They trace back well over 100 years, in fact, well over several hundred years. Now, what happens when this kind of family comes into the city? For this family, the transition is utterly impossible. The city operates on a cash economy. For a family to raise children, to do for children any of the things they need to have done, they must have money. If there's no breadwinner, there's no bread. If the mother is the breadwinner, she cannot win it and simultaneously fill the role of the mother. The boy who grows up in this situation is one for whom there can be very little hope. He never has before him the model from which to learn the role of the adult male as provider and head of the family. He has no tradition to guide him toward such a role. The equally disadvantaged children with whom he spends most of his time are unable to make up for this lack. Such a family group, once stable on the land, is inherently unstable in the city. Another source of instability is the fact that the disadvantaged have a hard time finding jobs they can fill. It's not only that there's discrimination against them, but also they usually are little skilled, and beyond that it frequently happens that they do not even understand the processes of the urban economy. Shortly after arriving in the city, it will not be long before they discover that by installment credit they can buy lots of things for no money down. Thus they quickly get into bondage to a system they do not understand, compounding their other economic difficulties. They're the last to be hired, the first to be fired, and the least able to manage the meager economic resources they have. A further obstacle to improvement is that neither experience nor training enables the disadvantaged to participate in community efforts to solve either their own problems or anybody else's. They usually lack the notion of organizing for group ends. Their real civic experience is unfortunately likely to be that of political machines greased through petty graft. They do not understand or appreciate government. It seems to be imposed upon them from a distance. Its bureaucratic organization mystifies them. Their past experience offers no explanation of its operation or reasons for its existence. They mistrust its purposes and expect it to be hostile, which it often is. Thus, the disadvantaged find themselves strangers in the midst of their own country. European immigrants in the 19th century were less alienated even on first arrival. True, they faced many problems in this country, but by mutual reliance and cooperation, they maintained their culture, their national identity, their church, and their family. The change in residence did not entail chaos. Their children were ready to move into American life and eager to accept the help of the school. The parents themselves recognized that there were jobs for them here. Their opportunity to advance rested primarily on their own hard work. These newcomers willingly assisted later arrivals and eased their adjustment to the American culture. Thus, the succeeding generations did adapt to and assimilate with America. This adaptability seems not to exist for the disadvantaged, even though they are already citizens. They're migrating at a time when lack of education is a graver handicap than ever before. Many have never learned to value education. They're further handicapped by the lack of a stable cultural base. The basic patterns of their lives, including family and church, have deteriorated or proved inadequate. Recent arrivals, having failed to make a satisfactory adjustment themselves, are ill-equipped to ease the ways for newcomers, and maladjustment is perpetuated. Thus, these American immigrants are different from their European predecessors, for they encounter few new ties, either family or community, to replace those they have abandoned. In the nation's most densely populated areas, they're trapped in the dilemmas of loneliness. The tragic fact is that persons impoverished culturally and economically in general accept little responsibility for the fate of the society. For them, private ends are likely to be the only guides to action. And even in private gain, they have little understanding or sense of responsibility. The society as a whole appears remote, if not hostile. This sense of alienation is perhaps the greatest obstacle to successful adjustment of the disadvantaged to urban life, for it erodes the ability and willingness to assume responsibility for oneself and one's group. What the facts add up to is, I regret to say, a malignancy in our society, and there's no simple cure in sight. In the large American city of the year 1970, if these trends are not reversed, half the inhabitants may belong to the category of the disadvantaged, persons alienated from constructive participation in the society, a threat to the nation's very unity, adheres in this situation. Mobility in search of a better life is a self-cure attempted by masses of these unhappy individuals, but they often succeed only in spreading decay, displacing former inhabitants and multiplying the problems of the community. Social services, police measures, public hospitals, public assistance, and educational programs are resorted to by the beleaguered communities almost as if they were weapons. But the costs of these services rise as the values of residential properties drop. Needs outrun resources, and the problem remains or grows worse. But even where there is no clash, even where the impoverished, ignorant citizen makes no active expression of his plight, even where he's doing no apparent harm to his community, his plight is of grave and growing concern to thinking Americans. Human degradation cannot go long unchallenged in a nation dedicated to the dignity of man. And the unrealized promise in the mind never set free disturbs not only the idealist. Increasingly, it haunts those concerned with the grim demands of national survival in an uncertain age. Limited background on a large scale is no new phenomenon in this country, nor is it more repugnant to American morality today than in the past. But mobility has brought the problem to the fore and made its solution more urgent. Current efforts to help the disadvantaged American are inadequate. The society must find ways to help him to overcome his handicaps and to take the place in modern life which the American tradition has promised. This problem cannot be left to be worked out by chance. It is no longer a matter for option whether we act, we must act. The question is, what will we do? My remarks are focused on what schools can contribute to the solution of this problem. But schools cannot go it alone. Every capable agency must be mobilized. Obviously, the society must protect itself from the disorders which go with the clash of cultures. This means police and repressive measures. I realize that it's fashionable to say that we can solve all these problems in schools. I think that we as school people should be a lot more hard-headed in denying the whole responsibility for dealing with this problem. Schools cannot replace jails, and they should not be expected to. Adults who have fixed habits are not necessarily desirable subjects for a school. We should, I think, be willing to say that some antisocial persons have a greater need for restraint than they have for education. This cannot be said, however, of a young person. Any young person, no matter how deprived his background, is a hopeful subject for education. Although the school cannot supply a total solution, the school certainly has the obligation to do what it can to help solve this problem. The Educational Policies Commission has recently stated that the central purpose of American education is to help every pupil develop his rational powers, his ability to think. This, his own ability to establish his own affairs, is the basis of his ability to establish his dignity and status in modern life. The children of the disadvantaged are so far from this ideal as to justify the question whether there's any hope at all of ever raising them to the level at which it would be practicable to develop their rational powers. In other words, can we educate these children, or must we be content with training them? You're all familiar, I'm sure, with the large number of experiments conducted in recent years with disadvantaged children. Virtually every city in the nation is working hard on this problem. These experiments prove that schooling for the disadvantaged can succeed. There's no question but that it is possible to raise these children to the level at which you can begin to develop their rational potentials. But the difficulties must be recognized, and plans must be carefully worked out. We cannot, as educators, afford to be anything less than coldly realistic. Before a child can be educated, he must be educable. For disadvantaged children, it's harder, far harder, to establish the conditions of educability than it is for more fortunate children. There are many factors in their lives and in their schools and in the communities which surround them which hinder their education. The stability needed for effective learning is generally lacking in their homes. Those homes are likely to be characterized by poverty, by meager educational ambition, by lack of privacy, by general emotional instability and personal conflict. Such homes tend to produce ill-fed children who are indifferent to responsibility and unable to concentrate, who have physical defects and poor health habits, who speak and act in ways strange to the school. Coming from homes in which physical violence and punishment are frequent, they tend to look on violence, not reason, as their own best weapon. Where the parents and community are poor, the school is handicapped. School plants tend to be old and outmoded. Staffs are insufficient in size and competence. Under these conditions, the schools have to compete with other social needs, and they find they often, indeed usually, enjoy a lower priority than health and welfare agencies and correctional activities. The modern public school is itself an institution of the advanced culture. The very organization of the classroom and the books and tools used in it are based on assumptions which are valid for middle-class children and are invalid in general for disadvantaged children. These practices tend to be foreign to the disadvantaged child. He can learn in the usual school only of the inadequacies of his own environment. He finds no basis for effective communication with the school. Such a school speaks from another world of things foreign to the unfortunate realities of many young lives. Thus, the school for the disadvantaged is itself disadvantaged by conditions in the homes and communities of its children, and often by its very inheritance of a traditional concept of schooling. Rates of failure and dropout are high, achievement is low, and classroom response inadequate. Classes tend to be large, although attendance is poor, and half-day sessions are common. There's often high turnover of staff and low morale among both staff and students. The maintenance costs of such schools are high, yet they tend to be unattractive and outdated and to lack necessary teaching facilities. Is it any wonder that in the face of a huge array of problems like these, that educators sometimes give up hope? What kind of school is it that's capable of overcoming an array of problems like this? What does it look like? First, and perhaps most important, you can say that the school which effectively serves these children is one which finds some way of overcoming hostility to the school environment. This hostility is generated in these children by the circumstances in which they live. The school simply must overcome this. It must make of itself a congenial place. It must create those circumstances in the life of the child, and that means necessarily also in the life of the family and of the community, in which the school becomes a place of importance to each child. And how will that be done? We find a clue, I think, in looking at the successful experiences of schools for the disadvantaged. There's a common characteristic, a center thread to all these successful programs. It is expressed in the word respect. Teachers who face the problems of teaching disadvantaged children need much more than respect, of course. They need all the skills and talents of their profession. They need understanding of their pupils. They need time to devote themselves to their pupils and technical assistance with their problems. They need vigorous administrative support. But all the technical training and administrative support will not overcome this problem unless the teachers have the special characteristics of personality and training which this situation calls for. Respect for the pupil is always important in education, with any pupil, anywhere. With disadvantaged children, however, it is especially important. If the children sense that the teacher is condescending or hostile, the gulf between the school and child will widen, often irrevocably. The effective teacher of disadvantaged children looks at them with full awareness of the circumstances which handicap them. He is not shocked or repelled by the fact that their standards are different from his. Instead of thinking of their badness or their failures, he's capable of wonder that in the light of their handicaps they are as good as they are. You will hear it said that there's a grave problem of teacher turnover in schools with a high concentration of disadvantaged children. This is undoubtedly true in some places. Yet we have found that where teachers have personally experienced the home environment of these children and have thus come to understand the gravity of the situation in which these children find themselves, they acquire dedication to do those things which the school can hope to do. They acquire the ability to look at the situation with a respect, a love, if you will, which derives from their understanding that these young people though they be children of scorn and companions of adversity, also share the essence of the human possibility. These teachers take from the situation the deeper lesson that when any child is born with him is the whole vast human potential for beauty and decency and goodness. His is truly a noble task, who helps the helpless to achieve their humanity, who brings hope to the hopeless. When a teacher achieves this understanding of the situation, the school takes on a new power. This is a school which has a very high degree of involvement with the homes of the children. It is closely keyed to its own community. It understands its pupils and adapts itself to them. This is a very hopeful kind of school. It is also a very professional kind of school. It requires a considerable corps of dedicated teachers, and they must be backed up by many specialized types of professional assistants. The qualities which mark the successful teacher, however, do not guarantee the opportunity to take advantage of them. That opportunity depends primarily on the number of children with whom the teacher must work. No single factor is more relevant to the success of the school than class size. Every teacher should work in conditions which permit him to do all he knows how to do for every child in his class. He should therefore be able to plan for and work with every child individually. 25 pupils per teacher is recognized by much of the teaching profession as a reasonable average for children whose home background is favorable. But the background of disadvantaged children prepares them so poorly for formal education that they have special need for individual attention. There should be 20 or fewer pupils per teacher in classes composed primarily of disadvantaged children. If sufficient professional attention were given to every disadvantaged child in the early elementary years, let us remember, the effect would be to reduce the need for especially small classes and other remedial measures in the high school. The school which succeeds with these children has not only small classes, it has also a very flexible program. It is prepared to do anything it can to help each child find some meaningful way to relate himself to the school. This means many different things depending on the circumstances. It certainly means that considerable vocational opportunities are available. For many children cannot see a valid reason for going to school except to help them get jobs. It means also that the academic program is geared to what pupils can accomplish. I know our critics worry about what we do with the academic program, and I agree that we should be able to do better. But it can do little good to force the study of geometry on a 16-year-old boy whose mathematical ability is at the third grade level. About the only outcome of this kind of pressure is to drive the child from the school. And for such a child, a drop out of school is a disaster for him and for all of us. It terminates our chance to deal with him. I would far rather staff the high school so that remedial work in arithmetic is available even at the third grade level if necessary. This school is also a very experimental kind of school. It has learned the lesson of the Hawthorne experiments, which showed that if the persons being experimented on know that they're being experimented on, they respond to the increased attention with increased effort. An experiment dignifies the persons on whom it focuses attention. It increases their self-respect. This is why educational experiments hardly ever fail, and why so many conflicting educational propositions have found experimental proof. The existence of this phenomenon does not tell us how to design successful experiments. I wish it did, but it does point to the wisdom of doing a lot of experimenting. Further, it is essential that these schools establish conditions in which every one of these children learns that the school is an institution which propels him toward his own goals. He must respect and value the school. And this urge to get himself educated must be maintained year after year throughout the time the child is in school. When you learn in the first grade that the child is out of contact with the school, that is the time to go to work on it. It will do no good to pass the problem along to the second grade. If you can't solve it in the first grade, the chances are you can't solve it at all. It's only by identifying these problems at the beginning and putting your attention to them and your full devotion to them that the school can hope to do its share of the job. If the school is to do its share, it must have vigorous support from the community at large. This may mean making some changes which are hard to produce. Think of the employment prospects of the disadvantaged, for example. True, many disadvantaged persons are not skilled enough to merit jobs. But what happens when they are skilled enough and then because of job discrimination are unable to get jobs anyway? It can do little good to educate a child for responsible participation if he knows that the door through which he leaves the school opens on a dead-end street. To me, this means that we end forthwith those employment practices which discriminate against persons on grounds of race or national origin or religious belief or on any grounds other than their ability to do the job. Similarly, the school is handicapped in circumstances which deny dignity to individuals. The educable person has a sense of self-respect. Anything that diminishes self-respect, therefore, hampers education. The disadvantaged are the main victims of present practices which deny respect. Racial discrimination, whether by law, as in some places, or by widespread attitudes, as in many others, gives its victims ample evidence that they do not enjoy the society's respect. The resulting sense of inferiority and exclusion is most severe among Negroes, but it is severely felt also among Puerto Ricans and Mexican Americans, whom other whites commonly regard as non-white. Good teaching gives pupils a sense that they are respected, but after school hours, the child returns to his home and community, and eventually he leaves the school for good. Even the best teacher must fail if the child knows that the school is only a temporary aberration from the realities he must inevitably face. The respect that makes a true education possible cannot come from the school alone. If the problem of the disadvantaged is to be solved, the society as a whole must give evidence of its undifferentiated respect for all persons. Desirable models also are basic to learning. The example of the teacher alone is rarely sufficient. Where laws, regulations, or customs prevent contact between cultures, they deny access to the models needed for effective education. Statutory devices no longer prevent increasing contact between ways of life in the United States, for they cannot reverse the shifting nature of the national economy and the related mobility of the population. They can merely prevent those types of contact, in schools, for example, which could do the most good. They have the effect not of insulating cultures, but of perpetuating incompatibility. The effort to increase respect and provide models, however, ought not take the form of moving children far from their homes merely for the purpose of achieving some planned composition of various groups within given schools. The need for models, great as it is, must be balanced with the need for schools to be neighborhood institutions. Especially with disadvantaged children, is contact with the home essential to full understanding of the needs of the pupil. The further children are transported from their homes, the more difficult it becomes to establish the close contacts which make the school effective. Thus, transporting pupils may defeat its purpose by limiting the quality of the program the children receive in the school to which they're taken. Transportation is justified only when it results in improved quality of schooling. Clearly, the schools have a large stake in America's success in developing genuine compatibility among all its cultures, but the entire society must participate in the process. Contact between cultures has been a major basis of progress in the history of human civilization. Laws and regulations which narrow the base on which to build the needed cultural changes undermine the ability of the society to progress and to live in harmony with itself. As important as increased respect and increased job opportunities is the question of general support of education. The school which succeeds in effectively educating the disadvantaged child is expensive. It has of necessity a considerable staff. Its classes are small. Its special services are readily available. It has remedial teaching at every level. It has guidance counselors, psychologists, and social workers. The teachers have time to plan their class programs and to visit in the homes of their pupils. All these services cost money. They do not cost as much, however, as the other things that must be done if this kind of school is not provided. American cities today spend more on crime and relief than on education. The irresponsibility and hostility of the disadvantaged are expressed in forms for which the society must and does pay. All of you here, no matter how remote you may think your community is from one of these cities I'm talking about, all of you have a direct stake in the solution of this problem. Particularly as persons directly interested in the conduct of education, you have a direct stake in the means by which this problem may be resolved. Millions of disadvantaged Americans are congregated today in congested sections of the large cities, with many more yet to come. How many we do not know, and with little that's good to look forward to. What has the American promise meant to these millions of people? Certainly it has not meant an effective opportunity for development. In the richest nation on earth, misery and degradation are the lot of too many of our fellow citizens. Yet this nation has the ability to reverse the situation and to hold out to all its citizens its ideal of human dignity. Of all the ways open to the society to deal with this problem, the school is the cheapest. It is also the way most consistent with the American tradition of human dignity and equal opportunity. And it is the only way that is tinged with hope. And now, in closing, I would like to use some words which are not my own. I use them because I think they say something important, and they say it better than I can. These are the words of the great chief of the South Cheyenne, Yellow Hand, at the time at the end of the Sioux Wars, when he met with the United States commissioners on the Chugwater Bluffs in southeastern Wyoming. They made the peace. The Cheyenne agreed to bottle themselves up on the reservation and keep the white man's peace. It was a moment of sadness and defeat for the Indians. They passed the pipe, and Yellow Hand made a speech. And this is what he said. He said, "Many kinds birds, yellow birds, black birds, red birds, white birds, all birds. Many kinds horses, black horses, brown horses, gray horses, white horses, all horses. Many kinds men, white men, black men, yellow men, red men, all men. Yellow Hand has spoken."